They thought their passion was a secret, stolen kiss behind heavy curtains, a whisper in candlelight, a letter slipped into a sleeve. But in a world where every glance was watched, where every gesture could be twisted into evidence, love itself could become a crime. And when their secret was discovered, it wasn't jealousy or gossip that condemned them. It was treason. Because in the eyes of the crown, intimacy wasn't just personal, it was political. This is the story of a trial where a kiss could topple dynasties, where passion was treated as betrayal, and where love itself stood accused. Imagine a grand hall filled with nobles, courtiers, and priests. The air is thick with incense, sweat, and anticipation. At the center, two lovers stand trembling, not because they murdered, not because they plotted war, but because they dared to love in the wrong way, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Before them sits a tribunal of judges, cloaked in velvet and power. To the crowd, it looks like justice. But to the lovers, it is the end of everything. This was no ordinary trial. This was the lovers' trial, and its verdict would change history. To understand why this trial mattered so much, you have to step into a world where every royal bedchamber was a battlefield. In medieval and early modern Europe, the private lives of monarchs weren't private at all. Marriage wasn't about love. It was about alliances, treaties, and power. Every kiss, every child, every night in the royal bed was a political calculation. If the queen strayed, if the king favored a mistress too openly, if rumors of forbidden love spread, entire kingdoms could collapse. So when two lovers were caught, their passion wasn't just scandalous, it was treasonous. Because intimacy had the power to rewrite bloodlines, to question heirs, to throw succession into chaos. One of the most infamous lovers' trials took place in France in the 14th century. Queen Marguerite of Burgundy, wife of King Louis X, was accused of adultery. The charges weren't whispered rumors. They came from her own sister-in-law, who claimed Marguerite and her companions had taken lovers in secret. The evidence? Suspicious pattern of gifts, clandestine meetings in the towers of Chateau Galliard, and the confessions wrung from servants under torture. What might have been a private scandal in another world became a national crisis. Because if the queen had been unfaithful, the legitimacy of the king's heirs was in question. And in the ruthless Game of Thrones, that meant the stability of the entire kingdom hung on the outcome of her trial. The punishment was brutal. Marguerite's supposed lovers were arrested, tortured, and executed in gruesome fashion, flayed alive, castrated, broken on the wheel. The queen herself was imprisoned, forced into a cold stone cell where she languished, stripped of her crown, her dignity, and her future. Her trial wasn't about love at all. It was about control. It was about reminding the world that a queen's body wasn't her on it, was the property of the crown, the vessel of dynasties. To betray the king in bed was to betray the nation itself. But France wasn't the only stage for such dark theater. In England, King Henry VIII turned the lover's trial into an art form. When Anne Boleyn, his second wife, failed to give him a son, whispers of her alleged infidelities spread. Soon she stood accused of adultery, incest, and treason. 5 men, including her own brother, were dragged before the court, accused of sharing the queen's bed. The evidence was flimsy, based on gossip and coerced testimony, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the king's desire to rid himself of a wife who no longer served his ambitions. The trial was swift, the verdict inevitable. Anne and her supposed lovers were condemned. On the scaffold, Anne declared her innocence, but the blade fell anyway. The message was clear. Intimacy wasn't just dangerous, it could be fatal. And yet, for all their horror, these trials reveal something fascinating. They show us how love and politics were inseparably entwined. To us, love is private. To them, it was a weapon, a threat, a scandal that could unravel empires. Think about it. A single kiss between the wrong people could mean that the child who would inherit the throne was indeed truly royal. That one act of passion could plunge a kingdom into civil war. That's why kings, popes, and councils treated love as treason, because to them, it was. But not all lovers' trials ended in death. In Italy, there's a lesser-known story of 2 nobles who carried on an affair despite the danger. When they were discovered, the evidence was clear. Secret letters, servants who testified, even gifts that betrayed their passion. They stood trial, facing not only disgrace, but the possibility of execution. But in this rare case, something unusual happened. The community rallied behind them. Their families pulled strings, the judges softened, and instead of death, they were exiled. Their love was punished, but it survived. And though history tried to bury their story, fragments of their letters remain a reminder that even in an age of fear, love sometimes found a way to endure. So why tell these stories now? Because they reveal the darker truth behind the gilded portraits and polished myths of history. Behind every king and queen was a human being longing, scheming, risking everything for a touch, a glance, a night. And behind every throne was the shadow of scandal, waiting to explode. Think of the people who watched these trials, the courtiers who whispered in corridors, the commoners who gathered outside the castle walls, desperate for news. To them, these stories were more gripping than any play, more shocking than any sermon. They were reminders of the fragility of power, the dangers of desire, and the terrifying truth that even the mightiest could fall because of love. Imagine yourself in that grand hall again. The judges lean forward, their eyes cold. The lovers stand silent, knowing their fates are sealed. The crowd gasps as the sentence is read. For a moment, the hall is filled, not with words, but with silence. Silence heavy with judgment, fear, and fascination. That silence stretches across centuries, reaching us today. Because the lovers' trial wasn't just theirs. It was a reflection of a world where control was everything, and love was the most dangerous rebellion of all. And yet, despite the terror, people kept falling in love. They kept risking everything for passion. They kept writing letters, meeting in shadows, defying the rules. Because no trial, no law, no execution could kill the simple, unstoppable truth. Love refuses to be chained. That is why the lover's trial still matters. And it reminds us that love has always been dangerous, that intimacy has always challenged power, and that even in the darkest halls of history, people were willing to risk everything for it. So the next time you hear a love story, ask yourself, what would you risk for passion? Would you risk your reputation, your safety, your life? The lovers in these trials did. And though history judged them harshly, their stories live on not as cautionary tales, but as proof that love, in all its defiance, endures. If this story fascinated you, there are countless more hidden in the shadows of history scandals, betrayals, secret codes, and forbidden passions. So make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode, because the next scandal I uncover might just change the way you see history forever. And now, I'll leave you with one haunting thought. Imagine being remembered not for the life you lived, not for the battles you fought, not for the crown you wore, but for the crime of love. Would you stand trembling in the hall of judgment, or would you whisper to your lover one last time, "If this is treason, then let us both be guilty"?
If you enjoyed diving into this strange, scandalous corner of history, make sure to unlock more secrets with us here at Throne of Scandals. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story hidden behind the golden doors of the past, because history is full of mysteries.